Hello, I am here with Jamil Smith. Jamil is a journalist, Emmy Award-winning TV producer, a senior writer for Rolling Stone magazine. His July 2020 cover story for Rolling Stone profiles Alicia Garza and Opal Ternetti and Patrisse Cullors, the three Black women who founded Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter movement. In the wake of the police killings of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, Jamil, lots to ask you about, and hope you're there. There you are. All right. But yes. I wanted to ask you about that. It's a terrific cover story, and it's very important, I think, that everybody read it and understand not only the origin of Black Lives Matter, but also where Black Lives Matter is going. And I'd like you to kind of walk us through Black Lives Matter from Ferguson to where we are today.
Thank you, Bob, for having me. I really appreciate it. Essentially, Black Lives Matter began with a viral Facebook post. Alicia Garza, on the night that George Zimmerman was acquitted of the murder of Trayvon Martin in July of 2013, wrote a Facebook post with the words Black Lives Matter in them. And Patrisse Cullors, who knew Alicia from her previous organizing work, hashtagged those three words. And from there, a viral meme was born. And after that, Opal Ternetti, who that night, by the way, had just come out of the Angelica Film Center and seen the movie Fruitvale Station, which of course is the Ryan Coogler film based on the Oscar Grant III shooting in the Bay Area. He was shot, of course, by a Bay Area rapid transit police officer on New Year's Day of 2009. That film, of course, she comes out angry and upset, and then she finds out about Zimmerman being acquitted, and she is ready to do something. She's ready to get active, and she finds out about Alicia's post, and she calls and she says, "Hey, I'm here to, essentially volunteer my skills." The three of them get together and form the Black Lives Matter Global Network, and that's another thing that I just really wanted, essentially Rolling Stone readers to understand what they were getting into. We have a lot of folks who are going out on the street, volunteering their time, their energy, essentially really risking their lives with this coronavirus pandemic to defend the lives of Black people. And I really wanted people to understand the basis upon which this movement was growing out of. That this wasn't coming out of some kind of just viral hashtag that it was starting, after George Floyd was killed. That this was the genesis of what this was coming from was from 7 years ago when these three women got together and started this movement.
Well, 7 years, in the span of movement history is not very, very long. But at the same time, what during those 7 years, Jamil, what did they do? Did they organize? Did they mobilize? Was there political action? I mean, to many white people, particularly, suddenly you have the George Floyd, the brutal killing, and then the Black Lives Matter kind of emerges in a completely different form that is much more empathetic, that is much more powerful, that is much more something that a lot of white people who originally were a little bit kind of put off by Black Lives Matter, maybe, they now feel that they're very supportive. What happened in the 7 years?
Well, eventually, Bob, I feel like the message got through. The message is very basic and very simple. Black Lives Matter. It is the very, I think it's the very least that people can demand, that people understand, that our lives should be, so have some sanctity in this world. We're not asking that, for any kind of specific accountability. We're not asking for any, particular laws to be changed. It's simply that in this society that we matter. And I think that, once people were able to understand that demand was not some sort of terroristic threat, nor was it some kind of extreme, elevation of tensions. I think people were able to adopt and understand that demand as a new floor for essentially where we were as a society. And then from there, we've seen now that activists are essentially asking for a lot more. They're asking for the defunding of police and such and so.
Well, in terms of asking for a lot more, and I want to go into the defunding of police in a moment, but on Juneteenth, on the anniversary of Juneteenth, you published another piece, really a fascinating piece, in which you called for a kind of a new reconstruction. You said emancipation is not freedom. That was the title of the piece, and you called for a new reconstruction. Tell us a little bit about what that new reconstruction would entail.
Yes, I think that we need a new reconstruction. Essentially, we talk about the first reconstruction that happens after the formal emancipation. First, Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, but the Emancipation Proclamation does not fully extend to all enslaved people until Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, when in Galveston, Texas, those enslaved people there are informed or essentially released after that harvest is completed. We have to understand that people were held in bondage essentially until the particular harvest was completed. That it's not because that the word didn't get out. So we need to understand that history correctly. Now, the Reconstruction was already underway. This period of, I guess you could say, really growth, where equality was actually possible, that the promise of the American project was actually possible for Black people. And that only lasted really until Rutherford B. Hayes was elected. He comes into office in 1877 and takes the troops out of 3 southern states that, army troops that had really been, the bulwark against white Southern terrorism. That Southern terrorism ensues. Black people are lynched and terrorized, essentially at will. And then you have this long period that's actually called redemption, which tells you a lot about who's writing the history. And that period reverses a lot of the gains, and we see the birth of Jim Crow. We see a period where these Confederate monuments are built. And what we need to see is a second Reconstruction, a new Reconstruction, where a formalized program of essentially, as you could say, redemptive, or you say, I don't know if you want to call them, if you want to call them, we could, I don't know if you want to call them something, payments to the people. I don't know if you want to call them, government payments. I don't know if you want to get into all that. But if you want to, I'm not as much concerned about the government paying people as I am concerned about government programs formed to, essentially right the historical wrongs of the past. And I want to make sure that there's education for people. I want to make sure that healthcare is equal for people. I want to make sure that the wage gaps are equalized. Whatever we need to do, that's what I'm concerned about. And so, whether or not a check shows up in my mailbox that forms all of the the payments that all of my ancestors were owed, I don't that's reparations. The kind of reparative programs that I want to see are things that I want to see in the system. I want to see a reparative system. That's where I really want to see. So
a reparative system.
Yeah.
I want to just I don't want to I want to just make sure that we understand what a reparative system might be. I'm old enough, Jamil, to remember the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act, and a lot of investment in the beginnings of investment in education and healthcare for poor communities, predominantly Black communities. Just the beginning. I mean, just a movement toward what might be redemptive kind of investment. But then the pendulum swung back very radically, starting with Richard Nixon, his war on drugs, which criminalized a lot of marijuana and crack cocaine. And then you had, years later, Bill Clinton. And I was, I served under Bill Clinton. I was in his cabinet. Mm-hmm. But Bill Clinton's crime bill, 3 strikes, you're out. That also contributed to a huge prison industrial complex, 2.2 million people now behind bars, again, disproportionately black and brown. I mean, all of that was sort of a pendulum swing against social investment in favor of or toward social control.
Yes.
And are you talking about maybe pushing back toward social investment? I mean, defund the police and ICE, and let's just not have as huge a kind of prison industrial complex, and let's not have as great even a military industrial complex. Let's invest in our people, and particularly in our black people and our brown people and our poor people, and let's make sure that this is an investment society rather than a control society. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's sort of.
No. You touched upon actually what I was gonna address, and it's actually what Eisenhower first touched upon, and it's the military-industrial complex. And actually, before I get to the crime bill, I want to rewind a little bit and talk about what Reagan did. And Reagan is really the one who introduced the militarization of police that we see today. Before we didn't see police dressed as soldiers on the streets of America until Reagan, introduces the militarization, the cooperation between the military and police departments in the way that we saw in the early 80s. And so you see the legislation begin, and that not just gets military given equipment to local police departments, but it changes the culture of what policing is. It changes how these police think about going about their jobs in the public. The police are supposed to be part of us, theoretically. They are supposed to be there to serve us, supposed to be there for us. They are not supposed to be there against us. They're not supposed to be there looking like an occupying army. And that is what they look like on a street. When you dress as if you were going on the offensive with assault rifles and tactical gear, that changes your mentality. And we've seen police themselves say this. This is not something that I'm conjuring out of thin air. So we've seen it go past the point where government actually supplies them with this equipment. We've seen them now to the point where police budgets coming from municipal taxes are supplying them with this equipment themselves. This is what police departments now do. This is now what they are expected to have. This is, and SWAT calls are now going up because of this. The use of the equipment is now, it's going up because they have to justify this. They have to justify their budgets. So we have to really understand what the culture of policing has become, and really address what we're talking about. More people are dying, more people are being shot because of what we are turning policing into.
But at the same time, we are defunding our schools, particularly in poor and predominantly Black and Latino communities. I mean, America is one of the 2 countries among all rich nations, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that actually provides less per pupil expenditure in poor, predominantly Black school districts than in white, upper class school districts. I mean, how do we justify pouring all of this military equipment and money into police and control and prisons, and yet defunding our schools and our poor communities? That seems to me, that's weird. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we spent as a country more on schools than we did on police and prisons. Now we're spending much more on police and prisons than we are on schools per pupil. That's outrageous.
Well, it's weird, but back then, you had a lot more white people living in cities. You had a lot more white people living in areas where more white children going to these schools. Now these urban areas are a lot more heavily quote unquote minority, and the inclination for these cities to disinvest in urban education is evident. We see it. And we see now the inclination, especially for conservatives, to invest in private education and for-profit education is not a coincidence. And I think that I just think that what we got to look at here is how do we get to a point where the defunding of police, like I get what people are saying, that's not necessarily the term we should be using, quote unquote. I don't really care. I think, defunding the police is a good idea. The defunding the police means not taking all of the money away from police departments. It means taking enough money away from police departments to fund priorities that we need in other areas that are been sorely neglected. And this is exactly what you're talking about, Bob. We're talking about education. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about nutrition assistance. These are things that need money, and that frankly, one party more than another has been looking to defund. Let's put it frankly, they've been defunding nutrition assistance. They've been defunding education, and we don't call it that. Maybe we should.
Well, maybe we should, and maybe we should also talk about the political parties that themselves and politics itself, because at least since Richard Nixon, we've seen politicians, particularly in the Republican Party, but I don't want to let the Democratic Party off the hook here,
By no means.
use racism as a political tool to get ahead and to divide people from each other. During this whole 40-year period we've been talking about, Jamil, we've also seen widening inequality and an impacted white working class that is going nowhere. And I wonder if that has anything to do with everything else. That is, if you've got a large number of white working people who are getting nowhere, getting frustrated and angry, don't you end up with kind of the kind of condition for demagoguery and racism that Donald Trump took advantage of?
Certainly, Bob. I think that's exactly the point. And I think that's something, see politicians like Bernie Sanders spoke, very eloquently towards that point. I think, folks need to understand that, race and class are used by political parties or by politicians to oppress, and they're things that are used essentially as intersectional methods of oppression, and we need to understand them in how they work together to oppress. And we can't look at one without the other. And if we're seeing people be oppressed because they're poor, we need to understand why race is a part of that, and how race has historically been a part of that. And I think, frankly, we've seen both, yes, to some degree, both parties take part in that. I mean, certainly the crime bill was essential to that. And I think, we need to, certainly recognize how, at least on the state level, it certainly exacerbated, mass incarceration. But, the criminalization of people is not simply about mass incarceration. It's about how, when you're denied educational opportunities, when you're denied, the ability to feed your family with proper nutrition, when you're denied proper opportunities to get a job, to feed your family, to earn a living wage, to have a dignified workplace, then yeah, criminality is a part of what's going to be a part of your life. And also, frankly, public safety is a concern. And if you cannot depend upon the folks who are charged with maintaining that public safety to treat you like a human being and to keep you actually safe, then everything falls apart. The entire societal bargain falls apart.
And that social bargain, that societal bargain, is a bargain not only to keep you safe, but also to invest in your education, your job training, your everything you need in terms of healthcare, your housing. And that presumably is what has come apart as well, which gets us to contemporary American politics. Joe Biden, are the Democrats, if Joe Biden gets elected president on November 3rd, is he going to do much better, do you think? I mean, have the political winds changed enough so that we're going to see substantial systemic change?
Well, here's the thing. I think that inevitably, getting this particular president out of office is imperative. He represents such an such a peril to not just the American project as a theoretical possibility, maximizing the possibility of what America can be, but he represents a real threat to our survivability as a country. That it's imperative that if any of us were running for office, we needed to get him out. So that's number one. We may not be satisfied with who Joe Biden is as a candidate or as a person, but frankly, he's capable enough to get at least the job performed to the point where we need it performed. But I think that I don't expect him to deliver the kind of transformative change that we need. I think he needs to be pushed, and we're going to need to push him. And I think, frankly, Democrats need to be okay with him being pushed. I think that's how we, frankly, change things in politics. We've gotten to the point in politics too much where people just coddle so much. It's like, oh, if we push people, we're afraid that Trump's going to be reelected. Oh, we can't say anything critical about Joe Biden because that means that it's only helping Trump. That's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. If we push our people, we only make them better. This is what's called tough love, people. When your parents pushed you harder, that wasn't necessarily because they didn't love you. Okay, all right. They pushed you harder is something. Sometimes it was because they wanted you to do better. Sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones who are going to give you the most constructive criticism. And sometimes that's what we're doing for Joe Biden. We're trying to give him constructive criticism. I want to see transformative ideas from Joe Biden. I don't want to see another proposal for a national chokehold ban. I mean, the New York Police Department had a chokehold ban in 1993. We saw what happened to Eric Garner. We need transformative ideas here. And I want to see, for instance, I would love to know what you think, what Joe Biden is going to do with TAMF. I would love to know what you think, Bob, who his labor secretary should be.
Well, I can't get the labor secretary, but I can tell you, I mean, Joe Biden is pretty close to making a decision on a vice president. I don't know who that's going to be. Who would be, if you were advising Joe Biden right now, Jamil, what would you tell him? I mean, what if he came to you and said, Jamil, I want your advice. I'm thinking about a bunch of people for vice president. Who should I pick and why?
Well, you can't pick both Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, but they both have incredible strengths. I think that you need somebody, to me, who he feels is going to help him run the nation. He's going to help him eradicate essentially the stench and the stank of the Trump administration from this country. Who is going to help him clean up the mess the best? And I don't know necessarily who that will be. If I did, I'd probably be in politics and not covering it. But I think that I think that there's certain. I think that there. We have to exercise a certain humility here. I can't necessarily presume to tell Joe Biden who would be best for him. I think that certainly Elizabeth Warren, her emphasis on corruption, I think would be extraordinarily strong. And helpful going forward. I think that Kamala Harris, her experience with prosecution and her knowledge of the law would be very helpful. In an administration. I think that both of them are ready to be president of the United States. Should the unfortunate happen, honestly, I think you can't go wrong with either one. I think there are governors who are extraordinary candidates. I think Val Demings is a terrific candidate. My hope is that he doesn't wait too much longer, to be frank. I mean, waiting to me until August is ridiculous. I mean, pick someone now.
My advice to him would be to pick Stacey Abrams as vice president, Kamala Harris as your attorney general right now, and Elizabeth Warren maybe as your top economic advisor, maybe your Treasury Secretary. I'd say Elizabeth Warren, Treasury Secretary, Kamala Harris, Attorney General, Stacey Abrams, Vice President. Announce them all together. What do you think?
I think Stacey's. She's an extraordinary person. I've interviewed her several times. She's an extraordinary intellect. She's got a tremendous drive, and I think she's doing something truly, truly important in Georgia with her voting project. And I certainly know her aspirations as far as her, being the governor of Georgia, and I certainly know that she's campaigned for this job. So I think if asked, I know she'd step up, and I definitely also think that she's got the intellect and the drive to be the president. So
Jamil, let me ask
yeah,
you. Our time is moving, and I apologize for just interrupting you, but I want to get this
no, of
in.
course.
The election, the primaries that we just went through in terms of on June 23rd. We've got Bowman and Booker and Mondaire Jones and a lot of some new people coming in. And
Hmm.
I wonder, I mean, the optimist in me looks at what happened in 2018 in terms of OAC and a lot of other very, very interesting, important leaders who were people of color and many of them women. And then I look at what just happened on Tuesday and I say to myself, the country really is maybe changing in terms of leadership. Are you as optimistic as I am?
Well, I'm Bob. I'm always subscribed to the James Baldwin theory. I'm like I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive. I know that's a paraphrase, but I default to that. I always deep down inside, even in my most depressing moments, I remain an optimist about America at some level. And I look at victories like that and I say, yes, there's a possibility for us here. There's a possibility for us winning here. And I say, to Jamal Bowman and to Mondaire Jones and to the AOCs of the world, and the AOCs still out there waiting and looking for their opportunity. Run for office, please. We need you. And we need people out here who can dream and who are shooting for the moon. And because if you don't start here, then maybe you'll end up here fine, but you got to start here. Don't start here and end up here. Like we have enough of those folks. We have enough of those people. Please, we need more folks who can start shooting for the moon. We need people who are going to raise the floor of possibility. So please run for office. I love seeing people like that win. And even if you don't win, even if you are, the Stacey Abrams of the world, and you get close, at least, run and make it look possible for the next person.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jamil. That's what I tell my students, even remotely. I tell them almost every day. Look, thank you. It's been really a pleasure to get to meet you, and thank you for joining me today. I hope we can do this again. Thank you for your articles. Thank you for your thoughts, your wisdom, and your, as a result, leadership. You're shooting for the moon. I'm shooting for the moon. Let's get everybody to get out of the Trump gutter that we are all in. Thanks
Yes.
again.
It's been a pleasure, Bob. Thank you.